Chun borrows a mountain of cash from the mafia, buys the most expensive ice creams, hires the most expensive contractor to build his safe house because only he knows that the apocalypse is coming, so there won't be any need to pay anyone back. Lujing Pedestrian Street, March 2nd, 2030. The place was unusually quiet, and inside a dim little room off the street, someone's voice cut through the silence, asking a kid if he had any idea what borrowing 5 million from him really meant. When the lights flicked on, the speaker revealed himself, Zhang Yang, the boss of the Dahai gang and the man behind the Luchong underground bank. The kid standing before him was clearly nervous. He kept insisting that he understood that as long as brother Zhang was willing to lend, even high interest was fine. Behind Zhang, a row of bodyguards stood like carved statues, each one more intimidating than the last. Zhang Yang calmly named his terms: 4% interest, 5 million borrowed, 7 million due in half a year. He told the boy to write the IOU for 7 million and hand over collateral of equal value. Chun, the kid, hurriedly produced a document, the deed to his house. Zhang glanced at it and commented aloud that the place was old and only worth around 3 or 4 million at best. But in his mind, he was already laughing. A large flat over 140 square meters being used as collateral for a loan shark? A fat sheep had practically walked into his hands. Then he casually said that 5 million couldn't be lent out based solely on that house. The moment Chun heard that, he panicked, clasping his hands together as if praying. He begged not to lose the deal, saying 4 million would work too, that a fortune-telling master claimed his luck was soaring, and he'd surely earn several times the amount back. Zhang lowered the offer to 3.5 million, pretending it was the highest he could go. Inwardly, he sneered at how easily a young gambler could be hooked. Chan, however, reacted as if he'd just been saved from drowning, thanking Zhang with overwhelming enthusiasm and promising to repay him soon. Zhang then adjusted the final terms: repay 4.9 million in 3 months, or the house would automatically belong to him. If Chen agreed, he could write the IOU immediately and receive the funds within 3 days. Chun said there was no problem, just that he had one condition of his own. The moment he said that, Zhang's curiosity sharpened, and he leaned in to listen. 10 minutes later, Chun walked out of the room with a bright, satisfied smile on his face. From inside the room, a cheerful voice called out, thanking Chun for his patronage and telling him to take care. On his phone screen, a massive deposit lit up. Ding! Mobile account received 3.5 million yuan. Chun couldn't hold back the quiet laughter in his mind. To him, the whole situation was almost comical. In a month, the apocalypse would descend. Who in their right mind would still bother paying back a loan at that point? With the money finally in his hands, his thoughts immediately shifted to preparation. He had no intention of reliving the nightmare from his past life. Back then, a catastrophic natural disaster had struck Blue Star, reshaping the entire planet's ecosystem. Intense solar radiation pushed global temperatures to a horrifying average of 50 degrees Celsius, plunging humanity into a high-temperature apocalypse that lasted 30 days. Humans, animals, nothing survived unscathed. The world had been thrown into chaos. Meanwhile, back in the underground bank, Zhang Yang was laughing to himself. To secure the money quickly, he'd even dared to raise the interest, and he felt no shame about it. In his eyes, gamblers hardly deserved a home. One of his men cautiously pointed out that Chen's house was worth over 4 million, yet they'd pushed it to 3.5, and Chen accepted instantly. Maybe it was a trap, but Zhang simply waved it off. He claimed he'd seen countless gamblers, people who would trade even their families for cash. What was a house to someone like that? He joked that the world was full of good people who paid extra interest without complaint. Chen, meanwhile, had his own private thoughts. He remembered all too vividly how he had once boasted, "You think you can scam me? I'm the man who borrowed from every loan shark in Luoyang in a single day. Interest rates? I laugh at them. Once the money's in my hands, don't even dream of getting it back." He knew exactly what was coming. After the apocalypse, the earth dried up, vegetation withered, creatures mutated, and society crumbled. Supplies became so scarce that people threw away whatever morals they had left just to secure a bit of food or water. Those who possessed resources were like kings. Even billionaires and celebrities ended up begging for a hot sausage or a sip of clean water. Those who failed to adapt were left to wander the dead streets until they met their miserable end. But this time was different. He had been reborn. He had foreknowledge. And before disaster arrived, there was still enough time. Time to prepare, time to build, and time to make sure he would never suffer like he once had. Chun eventually wandered past a group of girls who were giggling together, and the sight caught his attention. He recognized the boxes in their hands and immediately thought to himself that this must be the legendary ice cream assassin, the kind of luxury treat said to be even pricier than the so-called noble of ice creams. He stared for a moment, remembering how, In his past life, he never dared buy one for himself. Instead, he had wasted money treating that woman Lu, wenching to it again and again. Feeding such high-end ice cream to her felt more wasteful than feeding it to a dog. The more he thought about it, the more his chest tightened. Fine then, this time he was going to enjoy it. Without hesitation, he marched straight in and cut the line, stunning the group of girls behind him. He raised his voice and called out, "Hello! Give me 10 of every type of ice cream you have. Thanks." The girls were left blinking in disbelief. Whispers rippled through them. Was he serious? Could he even afford it? And wasn't he ridiculously handsome while ordering? Their impressions shifted instantly, and their eyes practically sparkled at him after such a bold display. The receptionist, however, had her own concerns. She thought the very thing they had been giggling about earlier, this ice cream assassin, wasn't cheap. And this handsome guy didn't look like someone from a wealthy family. She hesitantly asked again if he was serious, reminding him that 10 of each category would exceed 20,000 yuan. Chun simply kept a straight face. One of the girls clicked her tongue and mocked him outright, saying that with those shabby clothes, if he could really afford it, she would kowtow to him right there in public. Chun glanced at her calmly and asked whether she meant those words. She fired back, asking if he seriously expected her to kowtow to him and what level he thought he was to act so pretentious. Chen's smirk only widened. He told her he had tried to give her a way out, but she had insisted on jumping in herself. Now she was definitely kowtowing today. Even Jesus couldn't stop it. He declared that much with confidence. The girl sputtered in frustration, completely thrown off. Chun then turned back to the counter, still wearing that amused smirk, and told the staff to package all the ice cream by portion. He would take everything. He lifted his phone and showed the completed payment transaction. The receptionist nearly froze on the spot. After staring at the screen, she stammered that she needed to call the manager and asked him to wait a moment. The manager hurried out the moment he heard the commotion. Introducing himself as Fei Qi, he politely asked what Mr. Chen needed. Chun glanced around the store and casually told him to calculate the total cost of all the ice cream in the shop, adding that they didn't need to stay open for business today. Manager Fei froze for a second, then quickly checked his tablet. With a respectful bow, he asked Chun to wait a moment. Inside, however, his thoughts were spinning. Who exactly was this young master? With a single sentence, he had practically covered the store's entire monthly turnover. Despite the luxury prices, very few people actually bought these ice creams. Most customers only looked. When the calculations were done, Fei Qi reported that the items currently on display were worth about 70,000 yuan, and counting the inventory and storage, the total value reached around 1 million. Chun only smirked at the number. In his mind, it wasn't expensive at all. If the apocalypse was coming anyway, there was no harm in clearing out their entire inventory. Worst case, he could just stay home and eat ice cream during doomsday. He told Manager Fei he would transfer a deposit of 300,000 yuan first, then instructed him to deliver all the ice cream in storage to the address he provided. Manager Fei promised to handle everything personally. Chun then turned to the group of stunned girls and generously told them to choose whatever ice cream they wanted. The entire shop was on him today. Chaos immediately broke out. The girls squealed, gushed, and practically sparkled with excitement. One shrieked that it was amazing. Another declared that he was insanely rich. Another sighed that the more she looked at him, the more handsome he seemed. But Chun had one more thing to settle. He glanced at the girl who had mocked him earlier and calmly reminded her that the offer didn't apply to her. He was still waiting for her kowtow. The color drained from her face. Embarrassed and flustered, she stammered before finally bending as low as she could, wishing she had never opened her mouth in the first place. When everything was settled, the sun dipped toward the horizon, marking what had turned out to be a rather beautiful day for Chun. He sat on a bench, enjoying one of his newly acquired ice creams. As expected from an assassin, the taste and texture were phenomenal. He then took out a certain item, one that allowed anything stored inside to remain in perfect condition forever. That meant fresh ice cream anytime he wanted. With such a treasure, he thought even celebrities and young models could be summoned with a snap of his fingers. The thought alone made him grin. He hadn't expected it, but even his ability had been reborn with him. In his past life, abilities had only begun awakening one after another after the apocalyptic disaster struck. The fact that his had surfaced early this time was something he couldn't fully explain, but he knew one thing for certain: it would become his greatest trump card from now on. He let out a quiet sigh, thinking about how many tasks still lay ahead of him. Just as he was gathering his thoughts, his phone suddenly rang. The ringtone lit up the screen with the words, "Ring ring, the little fairy is calling." The moment he saw it, a wave of unpleasant memories surged up. The caller ID couldn't have been more irritating, Lu Wenqing. He clicked his tongue and muttered to himself that of all people, it had to be her. What rotten timing. He had been having such a good day. Chun picked up the phone while murmuring Lu Wenqing's name. The moment he did, a wave of memories surged up, memories of how, after his parents passed away, she had appeared in his life like a savior. Back then, he had been foolish enough to believe she was his light, never realizing she had been eyeing nothing more than the small inheritance his parents left behind. He remembered how she used to lean close and relay what her mother supposedly said, that if he wanted to marry her, the fully paid apartment in the city center had to be put under her name, along with a bride price of 880,000 yuan. To him now, it was obvious she had been a bottomless pit, reaching out again and again until his savings were drained. She always justified it by claiming it was all for their little family, and even encouraged him to sell his family's old house, saying it was outdated anyway. Eventually, she had even pushed to sell the ancestral home passed down for generations just to secure that luxury apartment she wanted. He recalled a moment later in their relationship when he had been shoved to the ground while she introduced him to a so-called young master, saying he was the person she had mentioned, the one who supposedly met the requirements for special materials. That was the instant he finally understood the truth. During the apocalypse, he had done everything he could to protect her, but she had sold him out to a stronger backer without hesitation. The backer had taken one glance at him and commented that there was nothing special about him, wondering aloud if they really needed to bother devouring someone like that. In the end, he hadn't even left behind a complete corpse. Now, with a second chance in hand, Chun simply smirked to himself. Since Lu Wenqing had come looking for him on her own, he felt it was only right to settle the old score. Later, at a high-end hotel, he answered her call with an affectionate tone, asking what was wrong. She explained that she had been out with friends and had accidentally lost a gold necklace she loved, claiming she was heartbroken over it. Chun immediately acted as though buying another was the obvious solution, but she insisted one wouldn't be enough and told him to buy 10 so she could rotate them. He played along, repeating her demand and pretending to agree easily. She asked when he had become so generous, and he replied that he had recently been lucky. He told her he had invested in virtual currency and made a small profit, so it was only natural to spend money on her. Hearing that, she sounded worried, asking if he had fallen for some scam, saying virtual currency seemed strange to her. Chun went on to explain that whether the investment was a scam or not didn't matter. She could simply watch whether he made money in the next round. He claimed that playing small had become boring and that he intended to go big this time by borrowing a substantial principal to invest even more. Since the loan required a witness, he asked her to help out, promising that once it was approved, he would give her 5% of the loan amount as compensation for her trouble. Just as he was speaking, a man's irritated voice sounded in the background, asking why she was taking so long to get ready. Lu immediately hurried to him, calling him honey and saying she would be done soon. Inwardly, however, she was comparing the profits. Spending a night with the older man earned her only 5,000 yuan, while simply signing a paper for Chun could earn her 50,000. To her, the risk seemed non-existent. It was just a signature, and she believed Chun Xiao to be too timid to ever trick her. Once the call ended, Chun thought to himself that he would be waiting for Lu Wenqing. After that, he shifted his focus to preparations, deciding it was time to build a fortress. He planned to turn the place into a structure of iron and copper within a month. He wanted bulletproof composite glass installed on all windows, along with hidden burglar bars, walls reinforced into 3-meter-thick bulletproof exteriors, and seismic fortification capable of withstanding intensity level 8 quakes. He continued listing requirements: 3-meter security glass, a full rooftop covered in solar panels with an independent energy system, air purification and filtration capable of blocking external toxins, an autonomous ecosystem with a 72-hour oxygen supply and internal water cycling devices, explosion-proof doors, and an access control system combining biometric and mechanical verification. The contractor, listening to all this, began to sweat, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the demands. Inwardly, he wondered whether Chun was some kind of doomsday prepper suffering from apocalypse delusions, or whether he had simply watched too many sci-fi movies. Before he could say anything, Chun stepped closer with a serious expression and asked whether it couldn't be done, reminding him that his resume claimed he was a defense specialist who had designed safe rooms for top tycoons. The contractor tentatively mentioned that Mr. Chen's requirements were extremely unique and high-end, though the budget might be an issue. Inwardly, however, he was thrilled, already assuming Chen was another wealthy man brainwashed by doomsday theories, someone with money to burn. Before he could say more, Chen displayed a hefty sum and stated that he would put down a 1 million yuan deposit, and the contractor could name the remaining balance himself. The contractor was stunned. Being allowed to name the price sounded unreal, and in his mind he was already celebrating his luck, convinced he had just met a rich fool who could fund his path to financial freedom in one go. Chen shook his hand enthusiastically, adding that he valued materials and quality above all else, and everything needed to pass inspection. The contractor promised confidently that there would be no problem, assuring Chen that the place would be built solid as a rock. Meanwhile, both men were thinking the exact opposite of what they were saying. Chen was silently telling himself that once the apocalypse arrived, the contractor wouldn't even be able to find him, let alone collect any remaining payment. The contractor, on the other hand, was already planning how thoroughly he was going to overcharge him. Both sides were preparing to rip each other off without the slightest guilt. Later, Chun noted to himself that the fortress construction was settled. The next step was gathering supplies. Medicine, food, and daily necessities would be easy to acquire. The real threat in the apocalypse wasn't nature but the human heart after society collapsed. Cold weapons could be bought at any hardware store, but firearms, those capable of delivering fatal blows, were far more difficult to obtain. He pulled out his phone and began searching for underground channels that dealt in such items. After scrolling for a while, one particular message caught his attention. The seller claimed to have first-hand sources and access to hidden channels, boasting that there was nothing a buyer could imagine that he couldn't procure. He emphasized honest dealings and safety above all else. Chun immediately sent a reply asking how to purchase. The seller responded that he would send the address privately and instructed Chun to arrive that night at 8 p.m. sharp. Later that evening, Chun made his way to the designated location, noting as he walked that the seller had chosen a place bustling with people. He was still considering the implications when a sudden commotion caught his attention. A girl was sprinting desperately through the crowd, with several men shouting after her. One of them barked at her to stop, while another cursed furiously, demanding she halt. The girl, terrified, kept running. A moment later, she darted behind Chun as if seeking shelter. The pursuers grew even more agitated, one yelling that she should keep running if she dared, and another snarling that she must be tired of living to cheat someone in his territory. The girl pleaded for help, her voice trembling. Chun had originally intended to focus on his own plans for the night, but the moment he heard her voice and saw her face clearly, he froze. It was Lu Wenqing. He couldn't understand how she had ended up in a place like this. The sight left him momentarily stunned, unable to believe what he was seeing. One of the men managed to grab the girl and warn Chen not to come any closer. The girl was crying uncontrollably, and Chan, surprised, realized he recognized her. It was Li Yuyu, the top student goddess from his middle school days, the girl admired by countless boys. He couldn't understand how someone like her had ended up in such a situation. While he tried to process it, one of the thugs demanded that she hand over the money and said she shouldn't even think about leaving otherwise. She kept crying as more of the men gathered behind their leader, clearly waiting their turn. One of them suggested they stop wasting time. If she couldn't repay the money, she could pay in other ways instead, laughing crudely. Chen's expression darkened, and he ordered them to let her go. The thugs finally turned their attention to him. Their grip on the girl didn't loosen, and one of them, angrier than the rest, stepped forward with clenched fists, demanding to know where this reckless kid had come from. He mocked Chun for trying to play the hero and threatened to cripple him first. The moment he swung, Chun easily avoided the punch, grabbed the man's arm, and twisted it until the thug cried out in pain. Then, with a single strike to the face, Chun sent him flying. Dust and smoke rose around them as Chun stood there, unfazed. Inwardly, he noted with surprise that the strange system assisting him was something he had never possessed in his previous life. Li Yuyu also recognized him, calling out his name in disbelief. But the man still restraining her tightened his hold and warned Chun not to move or he would kill her. Before the threat even finished leaving his mouth, Chun hurled a stone straight at the man's forehead, knocking him backward. The remaining thugs hesitated, suddenly intimidated. A moment later, another young man rushed into the scene, scolding them loudly for ganging up on a girl and asking where their shame had gone. The thugs instantly cursed at him for interfering and charged. Chun and the newcomer fought side by side without needing to exchange a single word. When someone attacked from the front, Chun took him down with a punch. When someone tried to ambush from behind, the other guy blocked and countered. One by one, the punks collapsed, and even when they were down, Chun made sure to kick them away to keep them from getting up again. When the last of them fell, Chun gave a cold command for them to scram. At that moment, a notification echoed in his mind. Fear plus +1, panic +1, severe pain +1, despair +1, humiliation +1. Negative emotion value exceeded 10 for the first time. Spatial expansion authority unlocked. While the punks stumbled away in fear, another prompt echoed in Chen's mind, reminding him to harvest diligently so the ability could grow stronger. Chun found the concept of collecting negative emotions amusing and mentally noted how interesting this new power was. Li Yuyu, still shaken, sat on the ground and thanked him, saying she hadn't expected to meet him there. Chun helped her up gently, asked if she was hurt, and even handed her something to cover herself with. She expressed her gratitude again but said she had urgent matters to take care of and needed to leave quickly. Chun simply reminded her to be careful. The young man who had rushed in earlier approached him enthusiastically, praising his hero saving the beauty moment and introducing himself as Mukong. When Chen heard the name, he realized fate had saved him some trouble. Mukong was exactly the person he had arranged to meet. Mukong was surprised and called it destiny, then excitedly struck a pose and said, "Sky King covers Earth Tiger." Chun responded by calling him a fool. Mukong froze, completely thrown off. A series of notifications immediately appeared in Chen's mind: dumbfounded +1, dazed +1, awkwardness +1. Chun cleared his throat and tried to ease the moment by responding with another nonsense phrase, saying he meant it as a joke to lighten the mood. He even mimicked the silly pose to reduce Mukong's embarrassment. Mukong burst out laughing, calling Chen unbelievable, and then motioned for him to follow. They moved into a secluded area where Mukong opened a box filled with firearms. He explained that they were Russian-made, durable and reliable, but warned that they didn't come with many bullets, so Chun would need to use them wisely. Since Chun seemed skilled and interesting, Mukong offered him a friendship price, saying it was his way of forming a connection. Chun accepted and thanked him. Mukong added that Chen's movements suggested he was an expert, and if there were no further questions, they could finalize the deal. But before he could finish, Chun casually asked whether the gun came with a silencer, whether there was a warranty card, and if Mukong could throw in an extra box of bullets. Mukong was speechless. Internally, he wondered if Chun even understood what a friendship price meant. Items like these usually sparked bidding wars on the black market, often selling for twice the cost, and this guy was asking for warranties and freebies as if he were buying home appliances. Mukong felt himself grow more and more frustrated, thinking Chun might as well just rob him. A new notification flickered through Chen's mind, noting the spike in negative emotions: shock +1, heartache +1, speechless +1. Seeing Mukong's face twist in pain, Chun quickly told him not to worry about it. If the extras weren't possible, he said they could forget it. He added that they would just follow the price already agreed on, and that he would transfer the money immediately. Inwardly, Chun marked the deal as complete. He now had supplies, weapons, and the beginnings of a fortress. Only one final piece remained. Later that night, inside an extravagant hotel suite, a woman in a red dress stood by the window, bathed in moonlight. When she turned, Chun wrapped an arm around her and complained that she had taken too long and kept him waiting on sore legs. Lu Wenqing asked whether the thing he mentioned was truly risk-free. Chun reassured her sweetly, claiming it was only a formality, and that he loved her too much to ever scam her. In her mind, however, Lu dismissed any notion of danger. She told herself that this pathetic simp nearly sold his own blood once just to buy her a handbag. He was far too busy worshipping her to dare deceive her. Later, at Boss Zhang's office, Zhang Yang praised her decisiveness and even complimented her handwriting as she signed the contract. She handed the documents back without a second thought. Zhang, on the other hand, was practically smirking inside. He thought she genuinely believed she was only acting as a guarantor, when in truth, the moment she signed, the debt legally became hers. And when she inevitably failed to repay it, he had other methods in mind for collecting, methods he was already imagining with satisfaction. Lu Wenqing continued watching him smugly, unaware of the trap she'd walked into. Meanwhile, Chun silently observed everything, thinking to himself that she was signing her own indenture contract. Her greed, foolishness, and self-confidence would end up paying off the remainder of his safe house's construction costs perfectly. Everything had gone smoother than he expected, and he silently thanked her. A short while later, the contractor proudly showed Chun the completed safe house. He assured Chen that every material used met the highest military standards: heat insulation, soundproofing, explosion-proofing, drill-proofing, even the structural strength to withstand multiple small-scale nuclear shockwaves. Chun acknowledged the quality and thanked him. The contractor laughed heartily and told Chun to call him whenever he needed more work. Finally, inside the finished safe house, Chun took a moment to sit down and relax. Just then, a broadcast echoed from his screen. insane. Affected by unprecedented super-strong solar flare activity, the entire globe will experience continuous extreme high-temperature weather. The news report continued, warning that temperatures across many regions were expected to break historical records and urging all citizens to take immediate protective measures. Chun listened quietly, then picked up the gun lying beside him. He remarked to himself that the moment had finally arrived. Outside his reinforced walls, the world was beginning to ignite, heat waves surging, flames blooming across cities, and panic spreading everywhere. He walked to the window and watched as the world outside descended into burning chaos. He stood watching the world burn, secure and ready for whatever came next. The news anchor continued reporting that a super-strong solar flare had erupted, causing violent disturbances in Earth's ionosphere. Extreme high-temperature phenomena were already appearing across the globe, with daytime highs expected to reach as much as 45 degrees Celsius. Citizens were advised to take heatstroke precautions and avoid going outside at noon unless absolutely necessary. Chun listened without surprise. He already knew this was coming. In his mind, he noted that the temperature had begun to rise, but this was only the beginning. Compared to his past life, it even felt like things were escalating faster and more brutally this time. Outside, panic spread among ordinary people. Everyone wanted to hide indoors, yet even inside their homes, the heat was suffocating and unbearable. Someone complained that it was already unbearably hot early in the morning and wondered how long such extreme temperatures would last. Soon, a street loudspeaker crackled to life. A vendor loudly warned his neighbors that the weather was deadly and claimed he had heard the temperature would keep rising next week. He shouted about supply shortages, saying water and electricity would soon become scarce, and urged everyone to stock up immediately or risk having nothing to drink later. He even claimed this was his final batch of goods. Yet inwardly, the man was delighted. To him, the heat wave was practically money knocking at his door, and he would be a fool not to seize the opportunity to get rich. Nearby, a woman complained that his melons were priced far too high and asked if he could sell them cheaper. Another woman examined the melons, which looked plump and juicy. Seeing them, the vendor suddenly became overly enthusiastic, praising their beauty and eagerly approaching them. He boasted about how sweet the melons were and offered to cut one open for a taste. If they bought two, he promised a discount and even threw in a free pack of tissues. The women listened cautiously, growing increasingly uncomfortable as the man leaned in closer and became overly familiar. He pushed his melons toward them, even hinting that if the nights stayed hot, they could come by his place to cool off. Nervous, one of the women backed away and quickly said they would just buy one. But the vendor refused to give up, stepping closer again and urging them to buy more and stock up, insisting that with weather like this, no one could guarantee there would be anything left to sell tomorrow. A few more people soon gathered around the stall. Among them was an elderly man who politely asked whether the boss could sell the water a little cheaper. The moment the vendor saw him, his expression turned ugly. He snapped that his was a small business and that there would be absolutely no bargaining, clearly eager to chase the old man away. Chun stood nearby, watching the scene unfold, and immediately recognized the man. He inwardly clicked his tongue, realizing it was Li Dafu. Memories from his past life surfaced instantly. This man had once made his life miserable. Back then, Li Dafu had loved shouting in public, accusing him of stealing and calling people over to watch, even when Chun had only tried to pick up something that had fallen and return it. Chun remembered desperately trying to explain that he hadn't stolen anything, that he had only seen the item on the ground and wanted to put it back. But Li Dafu had refused to listen, sneering that no one would be that kind-hearted. He had pointed at Chen's shabby clothes and insisted that someone like him couldn't have clean hands, threatening to call the police if he didn't pay up. The surrounding crowd had joined in, looking at Chun with disdain. Some had muttered that someone so young shouldn't be stealing, while others claimed his silence proved his guilt. Even as Chun insisted he hadn't taken anything, no one believed him. Every ounce of humiliation from that day came flooding back. Now, standing here again, Chen's gaze fell on a bag of potato chips marked with a manager's recommendation tag. He picked it up, thinking he might as well eat some. Then, with deliberate calm, he asked Li Dafu whether the chips were made of gold or capable of preventing heatstroke, questioning why they were being sold at such an outrageous price. Li Dafu turned sharply to glare at him. At the same time, a notification appeared in Chen's mind, noting a surge of negative emotion. Disdain +3. The vendor immediately snatched the chips back and shouted at Chen to get lost if he couldn't afford them, demanding to know whether he could compensate them if he damaged the goods. Another notification followed, irritation +6. Chun merely smiled faintly and remarked that Li Dafu was holding on to so many treasures that he wondered whether the man could even sleep at night, suggesting he should be careful. After all, things had a way of getting stolen. Boss Lee suddenly felt as if he'd been cursed and flew into a rage, demanding to know who Chun was trying to hex. He threatened to beat him up, sneering that the heat must have fried his brain. Chun, however, calmly told him to settle down and casually asked whether he'd been suffering lately from insomnia, vivid dreams, weakness, and night sweats. That question caught Boss Lee off guard. He muttered that he did have some of those symptoms and even wondered if there might be a feng shui issue with his warehouse. Chun hushed him confidently, saying he'd known it all along and pointing out that Boss Lee's yin tang looked dark. He explained that it was a typical case of deficiency. That was enough to completely set Boss Lee off. He cursed Chun back, shouting that Chun and his entire family were the ones with deficiencies and swung a fist at him. Chun easily dodged the punch. He casually picked up a lollipop, popped it into his mouth, and advised Boss Lee to take better care of his health. He warned that excessive anger damaged the body, especially someone in Boss Lee's condition. As he spoke, he tossed a few coins onto the ground and coldly remarked that if Boss Lee didn't pay attention, he might die young. He then turned away, savoring the sweetness of the lollipop, leaving Boss Lee staring at the money on the ground. A notification immediately rang out in Chen's mind, detected strong negative emotion, anger +20. As night fell, a stray cat passed through the streets with something clutched in its mouth. Inside his safe house, Chen gazed at the night sky and reflected on his past life, remembering how he had swallowed his anger and allowed others to trample him. This time, he intended to reclaim everything with interest. He then recalled that he had unlocked spatial expansion earlier, and the emotions Li Dafu had just provided were perfectly sufficient to use it. A notification followed, consumed negative emotion, 20. Storage space expanded to 200 cubic meters. An unseen aura enveloped Chun, and for a brief moment, it felt as though his hand brushed against a doorway leading into another dimension. When dawn arrived, the heat was already overwhelming. Even sparrows struggled under the rising temperature. On the street below, Boss Lee returned to his stall and froze. Wherever he looked, there was only one thing waiting for him: nothing. Stunned, he shouted in disbelief, demanding to know where all his goods had gone and who could have done this. From the safety of his fortified home, Chun calmly sipped his soda as another notification appeared: negative emotion +66. The drink tasted great, but he knew this was only the beginning. Much more was yet to come. Boss Lee completely lost it. He ran around his store in a panic, shouting and cursing, demanding to know who had stolen his goods. He collapsed to the ground, almost crying, unable to accept what had happened. To him, this was worse than the apocalypse itself. The end of the world didn't scare him nearly as much as losing all his stock overnight. The people nearby started whispering among themselves. One person wondered aloud whether Boss Lee had staged everything himself just to jack up prices. Another worried about how they were supposed to survive if even the supermarket was empty. An old woman claimed she had seen a dark shadow drifting through the area last night, and someone else immediately questioned her, asking if she was sure. Boss Lee, however, refused to believe any of it. He shouted that it was impossible, that there was no such thing as ghosts. But even as he yelled, notifications silently stacked up in Chen's mind. Strong negative emotion detected. Anger +12, fear +3, suspicion +4. Chan stood nearby, watching everything unfold like a spectator at a show. He casually ate his snacks, finding that snacks tasted especially good when paired with other people's suffering. With a faint smile, he commented to himself that Li Dafu's emotional output was impressively stable. As he reached into the bag again, he deliberately let the packaging show. The moment Boss Lee saw it, his eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. He screamed that those were his goods and charged forward like a madman. Chun calmly raised the bag and asked whether the chips were made of gold or somehow able to prevent heatstroke, since they were being sold at such an outrageous price. Boss Lee immediately recognized him and roared in fury. Chun continued casually, asking if Boss Lee could really sleep peacefully while hoarding so many treasures, warning him to be careful or thieves might target him. Boss Lee finally snapped, grabbing at Chan and demanding to know where he got the chips, accusing him of theft while shaking with rage. Chun took a step back, pretending to be startled, and calmly reminded him that accusations required evidence. He even pointed out how strange it was that the entire supermarket was empty now, not even a single snack left behind. Then, with an almost innocent tone, he offered the half-eaten bag in his hand, asking if Boss Lee would like it. Boss Lee stood there trembling, his face pale with fury and disbelief, completely completely at a loss for words. Boss Lee exploded in anger, shouting that Chun had cursed him and that now all his goods were gone. He accused Chun of being the thief and demanded an explanation. In his mind, even if Chun hadn't actually stolen anything, he could still squeeze something out of him to make up for the loss. At the very least, he could use him as a scapegoat. Another notification quietly appeared in Chen's vision. Strong negative emotion detected. Anger plus 18. Chun, however, remained calm. He casually pointed out that other stores also sold the same chips and asked why Boss Lee was so sure it had to be him. He reminded everyone that the shelves were already empty when he arrived. If anyone wanted proof, they could check the surveillance or search his place. He even added that if they found any of Boss Lee's goods there, he would compensate tenfold. That sentence immediately made the surrounding onlookers murmur. Some pointed out that other shops also sold the same brand. Others recalled that Boss Lee had been complaining about prices only the day before. The atmosphere quickly shifted. Boss Lee felt his scalp tingle. Something wasn't right. How had this kid suddenly turned the situation around so cleanly? Before he could think further, Chun calmly added that if nothing was found, then the generator sitting behind the shop would belong to him as compensation. Furious and cornered, Boss Lee agreed on the spot, convinced that Chun was bluffing. He grabbed Chun and dragged him along, declaring that once the truth came out, he would see how smug Chun still felt. When they reached Chen's residence, the crowd gasped. The moment the door opened, they were greeted by a scene completely beyond expectations. The interior looked nothing like a normal home. Everything was neat, fortified, and shockingly well stocked. Expensive equipment lined the walls, sealed supplies were stacked neatly, and even large energy units were visible. Whispers broke out immediately. So he was hiding this much wealth? When did he become this rich? This looks like a fortress. Even Boss Lee froze in place. His eyes widened as he stared at the interior, disbelief washing over his face. This wasn't a home, it was a bunker. Chun turned to him calmly and asked if he was done searching, even offering to let him pry up the floorboards if he wished. Boss Lee's confidence completely collapsed. His face turned pale, and he quickly waved his hands, saying there was no need. He mumbled something about checking other places and tried to leave. But before he could escape, Chun reached out and grabbed his arm, stopping him cold. With a faint smile, Chun reminded him about the agreement they had just made, that if nothing was found, the generator would belong to him. Boss Lee stiffened. His face twisted as he tried to backpedal, claiming it was all a misunderstanding and asking whether things really needed to be taken this far. But the crowd was already watching, and Chen's calm gaze made it clear, this time, there would be no backing out. Chun calmly asked him why he hadn't thought about taking a step back when he was framing others before. At that moment, another notification popped up in Chen's mind. Strong negative emotion detected. Impatience plus 8. The onlookers began whispering among themselves. Some muttered that a man who couldn't even keep his word deserved what he got. Others scoffed, saying it served him right. Hearing those voices, Lee Dafu's face twisted with rage. He snapped back, accusing Chun of going too far and shouting that he was giving him face already. Then, without warning, he swung his fist toward Chun. Chun easily blocked the attack and twisted the man's arm in one clean motion. A sharp cry rang out as Lee Dafu dropped to the ground, clutching his hand in agony. A new notification appeared. Strong negative emotion detected. Pain plus 73. Gritting his teeth, Lee Dafu finally gave in, shouting that he would move the generator right away and begging Chun to stop. Chun calmly reminded him to hurry, pointing out that once the temperature rose further, going outside would become impossible. He added coolly that, without a generator, surviving the coming days would be difficult. Another wave of emotional data poured in. Humiliation plus 30, pain plus 86, fear plus 101. Chun watched without expression, knowing everything was unfolding exactly as planned. Just as things settled, his phone rang again. It was Lu Wenjing. Her voice sounded anxious as she said that several unfamiliar men had been following her for the past few days. They looked like debt collectors, and she didn't understand why. Wasn't she just signing something before? Chin already knew the answer. He simply smiled faintly to himself, standing quietly as he listened. This too was part of the plan, and it was only just beginning. There is more to come. If you don't want to miss it out, subscribe right now and turn on all the notifications.